Hello everyone and welcome. In this video we're going to be checking out the 2015 Ford Mustang GT. So this is with the 5.0. Now the trim that I am in is the premium with the performance package, so we're looking at MSRP of about 46 grand. That said, you can get into the GT Mustang in the low 30s. Now in this GT Premium, the interior is really nice. These Recaro seats are super snug, they're really well bolstered, and they're really nice in the corners to keep you, situated how you want to be. And they're also pretty comfortable. They've got a nice amount of cushion to them. Visibility all the way around is actually pretty good. Out the front, it looks pretty narrow, but you sit pretty close to the windshield, and so because of that, the visibility out the front's actually pretty good. Now to the sides, you've got really wide windows, and that really helps with the side visibility and checking your blind spot. This also has the shaker audio system, so that's also pretty good. The thing that's somewhat disappointing is that the interior really isn't that quiet. You do get a decent amount of road noise and wind noise at speed. On the highway, I was looking at about 80 decibels, 79, 80, so a little bit noisier than a lot of the cars out there. And so because of that, the sound suffers. The sound system itself, it doesn't sound quite as good when you get a lot of exterior noise. And, that said, you really don't hear that much engine noise either. So if I drop it down a gear and floor it, it sounds good, but it's not really all in your face. It's not that loud. But as far as the 5.0, let's go ahead and take a peek under the hood. Under the hood is a 5-liter V8 with an aluminum block and heads. It features twin independent variable cam timing and also has aluminum pistons with a compression ratio of 11:1. The engine produces 435 horsepower at 6,500 RPM and 400 pound-feet of torque at 4,250 RPM. Now, the Mustang weighs just over 3,700 pounds, so it does have a lot of heft to it. That said, there's so much power. I mean, the power-to-weight ratio is 8.5 to 1. Pretty impressive for the price range that these can be had at. And so, the torque is instantly available when you do put your foot down. A lot of torque there and a great throttle response to it. Seriously quick car when you put your foot down. In fact, anything under about 40 miles per hour, you're just asking to spin the tires if you do put your foot down, like we just did right there. So this car really is kind of meant for a bit higher speeds than some of the other cars out there. Anything under 40, you're just not going to have the full capability to put down all of the power it has, and then above that, you can start to actually use all of the power. Really strong pull, nice throttle response to it, and it seems to be fairly linear as far as the mapping for the throttle response, so you do have good control of it. Now that power is sent to the rear wheels through a 6-speed manual transmission. From the transmission, power is sent to one of 3 different rear differential options. Each of these have a different final drive ratio ranging from 3.31, 3.55, and as high as 3.73. Now this will actually change the gearing, so you'll have a bit more aggressive acceleration with the 3.7 Torsen differential, which is what we're testing, and this will bring second gear up to about 63.5 miles per hour at the red line of 7,000 RPM, or if you were to have the standard differential, you'd be hitting about 71.6 miles per hour in second gear. Now, as far as the rear Torsen differential, one of the downsides is that at low speeds, such as when you're going around a parking lot or parking, for example, it tends to have a little bit too much lock, and so it doesn't allow for different speeds between the two wheels, and so you get some clunking and you get some tire scrub that goes on as your wheel kind of hops back there in order to try and fight against that differential. That said, I would still recommend going with the Torsen differential if you can afford it, simply because you're going to get better acceleration out of this and, a little bit more aggressive gearing, and so you're going to have better acceleration times. So, it will give it a performance benefit. Now, one of the other downsides of that differential comes to the fuel economy story, which is pretty interesting for the Mustang. It's rated 15 in the city and 25 on the highway, which is a pretty large gap. And part of the reason for this is that what they've done is the first 5 gears are geared with fairly close ratios and pretty aggressively, so you get great acceleration for the first 5 gears. And then for the 6th gear, it's an overdrive gear, and they drop the revs pretty low, and so the gear ratio allows you to get good fuel economy on the highway. I really like the way they've done the gearing in this car. I think that's a really clever way, and I wish more manufacturers did something like that. Now that said, with the Torsen differential, as I mentioned, you're going to have a bit more aggressive gearing, and so because of that, you're going to get a little bit worse fuel economy. Now in my own testing, I was able to do 24.5, and that was primarily highway driving, so it is capable of decent fuel economy considering the size of the engine and the weight of the car. So coming into some corners here, we can kind of see how it handles. You know, it actually does seem to stay pretty neutral. It's pretty heavy, but it's surprising how much grip it has even in these really cold conditions. It's been in the 30s most of today. Looks like it's in the low 40s right now. And this is on summer tires, so not the greatest conditions for it. You, of course, can induce oversteer pretty much any time you want simply by pushing your foot down. There's plenty of torque to give, and so if you do put your foot down, the tail is going to slide out. Now, as far as the steering feel, I'm actually surprised just how much I like it. It has a great feel to it, a good amount of resistance, a good weight to it, and you know, the response is actually pretty good. When I was in the convertible Mustang, it seemed like the response was pretty sluggish when I turned in. On this, it seems much sharper, so that was pretty impressive to me, considering that this is even heavier than that vehicle, but it seems to be tuned quite a bit better. Now, there are 3 steering modes, so you've got normal, sport, and comfort, and that adjusts how much effort is required on your part and how much the assist takes over. So in comfort, you won't really have to do that much effort, and in sport, that will require the most amount of effort. Now, as far as the transmission, this has been something that I've actually been pretty impressed with. Not necessarily the gear shifts themselves, they're pretty notchy, but I do really like the way the clutch works, and it has extremely smooth engagement. I'm not sure if it uses a dual mass flywheel or not, but regardless, the engagement with the clutch pedal is extremely smooth. Even in first gear, just rolling onto a start, it's really smooth, and it uses most of the range of the clutch pedal. So I really like the way the clutch pedal feels, and overall it leads to really nice shifting in this vehicle. You don't really notice any rev hang or anything like that. Overall, I really do like the manual transmission, and a lot of that is due to the clutch, which is just super smooth for engagement. Now, before we get into the 0 to 60 test, let's talk about the brakes. Up front, there's 6-piston Brembo calipers matched with 15-inch ventilated rotors. This is matched to a McPherson strut-style suspension. And for 2015, the Mustang embraces an independent rear suspension, a multi-link setup with single pistons and vented rotors that are 13 inches in diameter. So as far as the brake pedal feel, it's actually pretty similar to the Alpha 4C, and that's pretty surprising to me because that car weighs 1,200 pounds less. But what I mean by that is, it's a really short amount of travel, and so it's pretty sensitive once you get into it. And it actually feels a lot more like kind of a race car where you just basically apply a different amount of pressure, and the different amount of pressure adjusts how much braking you have, but you don't notice the pedal actually travel. So with this, you have a little bit at the beginning where it kind of compresses a little bit, and then you get into it and it's just really firm. And it actually feels pretty good, and the braking is really strong. Okay, so we're going to test out the launch control and get a quick 0 to 60 in. Now, you can change the launch control settings so you can set what RPM you want to drop the clutch at, whether that's 3,000 or 4,500 or anything in increments of 100 RPM in between that. Now, because it's on street tires and it's pretty cold outside, anything above 3,000 RPM, it tends to just spin, and even at 3,000 RPM, it has a hard enough time finding traction. So in these conditions, I'm going to keep it set at 3,000 RPM, and we'll do a first gear launch, shift into second, and let it do all the traction settings and sort everything out in order to get the optimum acceleration. Still had problems hooking up. Okay, so just for fun, we're going to try doing this in second gear, and I'm going to raise the RPM that it holds it at for launch control to 3,500 to give it a little bit more power, since you know it's going to be at a disadvantage as far as gearing. Now, because we had traction issues with first gear, and also because we won't have to do any gear shifts during this test, it may provide a better time, so we'll see what happens. Better, but still these conditions just aren't allowing for a good launch. It's just too cold out for these tires, so it's unfortunate because this thing is really capable, and my tests aren't going to show it, but it's seriously fast. You know, for the price, the quickness that you get in this car is pretty incredible. I've really enjoyed driving it. It's been a lot of fun. You know, it's a really big vehicle, but it has huge power to go along with it, so it has been enjoyable to drive. I can't deny that. Thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below.